The small hands moved with desperate precision behind the bright pink Hello Kitty backpack, fingers forming the universal distress signal that most adults had forgotten existed. 3 quick clenches, 3 slow, 3 quick again. SOS, over and over, while her captor studied legal documents just 3 feet away, oblivious to the silent scream for help happening right under his nose. Across the crowded Arizona rest stop, former Marine Marcus Stone's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. 23 years of military training had burned that signal into his memory, but he'd never expected to see it from a 6-year-old girl in a roadside diner on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Her blue eyes met his for just a moment, eyes that held too much knowledge, too much fear for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. The man beside her looked up from his papers, and the little girl's hands went perfectly still. Some signals are too important to ignore. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Marcus Stone had learned to read danger the way other men read newspapers, quickly, thoroughly, and with the understanding that missing the fine print could get you killed. At 34, the former Marine carried himself with the controlled stillness of someone who'd seen too much and survived to tell about it, though he rarely did. His weathered hands bore the scars of 2 deployments in Afghanistan, and his dark eyes held the weight of memories he couldn't shake, no matter how many miles he put between himself and the past. The Arizona rest stop buzzed with the typical chaos of summer travel. Families stretching their legs between cities, truckers grabbing quick meals, tourists consulting maps with the confused expression of people who'd trusted their GPS too completely. Outside, the desert heat shimmered off the asphalt in waves that made the horizon dance like a mirage. Inside Linda Peterson's Desert Rose Diner, the ancient air conditioning unit wheezed against the oppressive warmth, casting blessed cool air over red vinyl booths and checkered linoleum floors that had seen decades of weary travelers. Marcus had stopped here by accident, his rusted Ford pickup overheating on the long stretch between Phoenix and Tucson. He'd been driving aimlessly since the job interview in Phoenix had gone predictably wrong. Another employer uncomfortable with the gaps in his resume, the nervous energy that came with PTSD, the way his eyes constantly scanned for exits. The disability checks barely covered rent in his 1-bedroom apartment in El Paso, but pride kept him from moving back to Michigan, where his sister waited with worried phone calls and careful questions about his mental health. The little girl sat in the corner booth like a perfect doll, her blonde hair catching the fluorescent lights in golden waves. She wore a pristine white sundress with tiny blue flowers, the kind of outfit that spoke of money and careful attention to appearance. Her Hello Kitty backpack rested beside her, incongruously cheerful against the booth's faded red vinyl. Everything about the scene screamed normal family road trip, except for her eyes. The man across from her commanded attention without trying. Brandon Hayes looked like Central Casting's version of success. Perfectly styled sandy hair, expensive polo shirt, gold watch that caught the light when he turned pages of what appeared to be legal contracts. His smile came easily when other diners glanced their way, the practiced charm of someone accustomed to being liked and trusted. When he spoke to the little girl, his voice carried the patient tone of a devoted father. But Marcus had learned to look beyond surfaces. The child's shoulders curved inward, making herself smaller. Her hands rested motionless in her lap except for those moments when they moved behind her backpack with urgent precision. She ate nothing from the plate in front of her, merely pushed food around with mechanical movements while her eyes darted between the man and the exits. Something was very, very wrong. Marcus forced himself to look away, to study the coffee growing cold in his hands while his peripheral vision tracked every movement at the corner booth. The child, Emma, he'd heard the man call her, had repeated the SOS signal 3 more times in the past 10 minutes. Each repetition sent ice through his veins, memories of Afghan villages where children's eyes held similar desperation flooding back unbidden. The rational part of his mind catalogued reasons to stay seated. He could be wrong about the signal. Military paranoia had cost him jobs before, relationships, the normal life everyone expected him to want. The man looked respectable, spoke gently, showed no obvious signs of aggression. Interfering with strangers was how you ended up arrested, sued, or worse. His therapist's voice echoed in his head. Not every situation requires your intervention, Marcus. You can't save everyone. But the child's fingers moved again, 3 quick, 3 slow, 3 quick, and 23 years of training overrode civilian caution. Marcus stood slowly, leaving his coffee and walking toward the restroom area that would take him past their table. As he approached, he caught fragments of their conversation. "Remember what we discussed about talking to strangers, sweetheart?" Brandon was saying, his voice warm honey over steel. "Some people might ask you questions, but you just smile and let Daddy handle everything." Emma nodded solemnly, her small hands now folded perfectly in her lap. "Yes, Daddy." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Something in her tone, too careful, too practiced, made his skin crawl. Real children didn't speak to loving parents with such rigid control. On his return from the restroom, Marcus deliberately slowed near their table. Emma's eyes found his immediately, and for just a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. And the raw terror in those blue depths nearly staggered him. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice carefully casual. "I couldn't help but notice your daughter's backpack. My niece has the same one. She's obsessed with Hello Kitty." Brandon looked up with practiced smile, but Marcus caught the quick assessment in his eyes, the way he sized up potential threats. "Kids and their characters, right? Emma here won't go anywhere without it." "Smart girl," Marcus said, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "It's always good to keep important things close, isn't it?" Emma's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded. Behind her backpack, where Brandon couldn't see, her small hand made a single deliberate motion, pointing toward the bathroom. "Well, we should be getting back on the road," Brandon said, already gathering his papers. "Long drive ahead of us." "Of course," Marcus replied, standing. "Safe travels." But as he walked away, Marcus's mind raced. The child wanted to tell him something, needed to pass information without alerting her captor. Because that's what Brandon Hayes was. Marcus was certain now. The expensive clothes, the legal documents, the practiced charm were all camouflage for something much darker. Marcus bought a candy bar from Linda Peterson at the counter, his eyes never leaving the corner booth. Linda, a grandmother whose weathered face spoke of decades watching travelers, followed his gaze. "Cute little family," she said conversationally, but her tone held questions. "The little girl," Marcus said quietly. "How long have they been here?" "About an hour. Ordered food, but she hasn't eaten a bite. Keeps looking around like she's lost." Linda's brown eyes sharpened. "Why? You know them?" Before Marcus could answer, Emma stood and walked purposefully toward the restroom area, her Hello Kitty backpack clutched against her chest. Brandon barely glanced up from his documents, his attention focused on a phone call that had just come in. "Yeah, we're on schedule," Marcus heard Brandon say. "The pickup is still set for 4 o'clock. She's been cooperative." Pickup. The word hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just abuse. This was trafficking. Marcus waited 30 seconds, then followed Emma toward the restrooms. The narrow hallway was empty except for the little girl standing by the water fountain, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, crouching down again. "Are you okay?" Emma looked toward the dining area, then back at him. Her small hands fumbled with the zipper of her backpack. "He's not my daddy," she whispered, so quietly Marcus had to strain to hear. "My real daddy died when I was 3. Mommy said never to tell, but—" She pulled out something small and silver, a USB drive hidden inside a Hello Kitty coin purse. "Daddy taught me to always have proof." Marcus's blood turned to ice as Emma pressed the drive into his palm. "What's on this?" "Videos of him hurting Mommy, and the medicine he makes me take to sleep, and—" Her voice broke. "Other little girls. He showed me pictures and said if I wasn't good, I'd end up like them." The hallway seemed to tilt around Marcus. This wasn't just one child in danger. This was a network, an operation. And somehow a 6-year-old girl had gathered evidence that could bring it down. "Where's your mommy now?" he asked. "Jail," Emma whispered. "He told the police she was crazy and tried to hurt me, but she didn't. She was trying to save me. The judge believed him because he's important." Footsteps echoed from the dining area, Brandon's voice calling Emma's name with increasing edge. "Emma? Sweetheart, where are you?" "Listen to me," Marcus said urgently. "I'm going to help you, but I need you to be brave a little longer." "Can you do that?" Emma nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Are you a police officer?" "I'm a soldier," Marcus said, "and soldiers protect people who can't protect themselves." "Emma!" Brandon's voice was closer now, anger bleeding through the false concern. "Go back to him," Marcus said. "Act normal. Don't let him know you talked to me." Emma nodded and walked back toward the dining area, her small shoulders squared with determination that broke Marcus's heart. 6 years old, and she was already a better soldier than most men he'd served with. Marcus remained in the hallway for another moment, the USB drive burning like a coal in his palm. His phone had no signal. The desert played havoc with cell service, but the diner's landline would work. The question was who to call. If Brandon had corrupted local law enforcement, if judges were compromised, then normal channels were useless. But first, he needed to see what was on that drive. When Marcus returned to the dining area, Brandon was standing beside their booth, his hand resting possessively on Emma's shoulder. His smile was still in place, but his eyes held a new wariness. "Everything all right?" Marcus asked Linda, loud enough for Brandon to hear. "Oh, yes," Linda replied. "Just restocking the napkins. Though I should mention, my computer in the back office is acting up again. Some kind of virus. Can't seem to get anything to load properly." It was a subtle offer, and Marcus accepted it with a slight nod. Linda Peterson was clearly more observant than she let on. "Technology," Marcus said with forced lightness. "Can't live with it, can't run a business without it." Brandon checked his expensive watch. 3:15 p.m. Less than 45 minutes until the mysterious pickup. Time was running out. The USB drive felt like a live grenade in Marcus's palm as he made his way back from the restroom. Every step calculated to appear casual while his mind raced through tactical possibilities. 23 years of military training had taught him to compartmentalize information under pressure, but the contents of Emma's whispered confession threatened to overwhelm even his combat-hardened composure. This wasn't just child abuse, this was a sophisticated trafficking operation with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of law enforcement and government. Behind Linda Peterson's counter, an ancient desktop computer hummed to life with the reluctant cooperation of technology that had seen better decades. The screen flickered twice before settling into a steady glow, and Marcus inserted the USB drive with hands that remained steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to discover. Linda stood guard at the office doorway, her grandmother's intuition fully engaged as she watched both the computer screen and the dining area beyond. The first video file opened with the timestamp from 3 months ago. Sarah Collins appeared on screen, her face bearing fresh bruises that makeup couldn't quite conceal. She was speaking directly to the camera, her voice steady despite the visible evidence of violence. "My name is Sarah Elizabeth Collins. I'm recording this because I'm afraid for my life and for my daughter's safety. Brandon Hayes has been systematically abusing both of us, and he's threatened to kill me if I try to leave with Emma." Marcus's jaw clenched as more videos revealed the escalating pattern of control and violence. Brandon's voice could be heard off-camera in several recordings, his tone shifting between false sweetness and cold menace depending on his audience. "Remember what happens to little girls who don't cooperate," he told Emma in one particularly chilling segment. "Remember what happened to Mommy last time she tried to be difficult." But it was the financial documents that made Marcus's blood run cold. Bank transfers to judges, payments to social workers, detailed records of bribes to law enforcement officials. Brandon's network was vast, systematic, and utterly corrupt. The final folder contained something that made Linda gasp audibly. Photographs of other children with ages, physical descriptions, and price lists attached like livestock catalogs. "Jesus Christ," Linda whispered, her weathered hands trembling as she gripped the doorframe. "How many kids are we talking about?" Marcus scrolled through file after file, his military mind automatically cataloging intelligence while his heart broke for the dozens of young faces staring back at him from the screen. Boys and girls ranging from toddlers to teenagers, all reduced to commodities in Brandon's sick marketplace. Some photos bore timestamps as recent as last week. "This is bigger than we can handle alone," Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. "We need federal intervention, but if Brandon's corrupted local law enforcement—" His words were cut off by the sound of approaching sirens. Through the office window, Marcus could see the first patrol car pulling into the parking lot, its red and blue lights painting the desert landscape in ominous colors. A second car followed, then a third. The cavalry was arriving, but Marcus's gut told him they weren't here to rescue anyone. "Linda," he said urgently, copying the files to her computer's hard drive. "Do you have any way to contact state or federal authorities directly? Anyone who might not be compromised?" Linda's eyes sharpened with understanding. "My nephew works for the FBI in Phoenix, but phone service out here is spotty, and if they're monitoring communications—" The office door burst open before she could finish. Sheriff Tom Bradley filled the doorway, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. Behind him stood a younger deputy, nervous energy radiating from his posture. "Folks, we've had a report of suspicious activity. I'm going to need you to step away from that computer." Marcus's training kicked in as he assessed the tactical situation. 2 armed officers, limited escape routes, civilians in the line of fire. But the most important factor was Emma, still sitting in that corner booth, still trapped with a predator who now had law enforcement backing. "Just checking email, Sheriff," Marcus said calmly, his body positioned between Bradley and the computer screen. "Nothing suspicious about that." Bradley's smile never reached his eyes. "I'm sure it's all innocent, but we need to check anyway." "Marcus Stone, isn't it? I understand you've been harassing one of our upstanding citizens and his daughter." The word daughter hung in the air like poison. Marcus felt the USB drive burning in his pocket, evidence that could bring down an entire network if it ever made it to honest authorities. But with corrupted local law enforcement controlling the scene, those honest authorities might as well be on another planet. In the dining area beyond, Brandon was gathering his papers with increased urgency. Through the office window, Marcus could see him checking his expensive watch repeatedly. 4:15 p.m. Whatever pickup he'd arranged was getting closer, and Emma was running out of time. "Sheriff," Linda said with the diplomatic tone of someone who'd spent decades dealing with difficult customers, "perhaps we could discuss this outside. No need to disturb the other diners." Bradley's laugh held no warmth. "Oh, I think everyone here is going to be very interested in what we have to discuss. You see, Mr. Stone here has been making some pretty serious accusations against a pillar of our community. False accusations that could constitute harassment, stalking, maybe even attempted kidnapping. The charges were clearly fabricated, designed to discredit Marcus before he could expose the truth. But Bradley's confidence suggested this wasn't improvised, this was a well-rehearsed protocol for dealing with threats to their operation. Marcus's phone vibrated with an incoming text. Without looking, he knew it wasn't good news. The message was from a blocked number. "Stop interfering or the girl suffers. There are worse fates than a quick sale." "Problem, Mr. Stone?" Bradley asked with mock concern, having clearly noticed Marcus's reaction to the phone. Before Marcus could respond, Emma's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She was standing beside their booth now, her Hello Kitty backpack clutched against her chest, speaking in the clear, caring voice of a child who'd been taught to project when necessary. "Officer," she said, looking directly at Sheriff Bradley, "the man over there hurt my mommy. I have pictures." Bradley's composure flickered for just a moment, long enough for Marcus to see genuine alarm beneath the practiced authority. "Now, sweetheart, sometimes little girls get confused about what they see. Your daddy explained that your mommy was sick and said things that weren't true." Emma's response was to reach into her backpack and pull out a cell phone. Not a toy, but a real device with a cracked screen and worn case. "My daddy taught me to always have proof," she said with heartbreaking dignity. "Before he died, he said truth is the most important thing, even when powerful people want you to lie." The phone contained additional evidence, photos Emma had taken secretly, voice recordings captured when Brandon thought she was asleep, even video of court proceedings where false testimony had been presented. Her deceased father, Detective James Collins, had trained his daughter well in the art of gathering evidence and protecting herself. Sheriff Bradley lunged for the phone, but Emma was quicker. She tossed it to Marcus, who caught it instinctively. The device immediately began uploading its contents to a cloud server, another safeguard her father had programmed years ago. "That's destruction of evidence," Bradley snarled, his hand moving to his weapon. "I'm placing all of you under arrest." But Emma wasn't finished. From her backpack, she produced one more item, a small recording device that had been running throughout their entire conversation. "Everything you said is recorded," she announced, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to fight back with intelligence rather than force. "About the false accusations, about stopping the truth, about hurting me if Uncle Marcus doesn't stop helping." The tide was turning, but Marcus knew they were still outnumbered and outgunned. Through the window, he could see more patrol cars arriving, along with a black SUV that had government plates. Whatever network Brandon had assembled, it was mobilizing to protect itself. Linda stepped forward, her grandmother's courage finally overriding her caution. "Tom Bradley, I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become." Bradley's facade finally cracked completely. "You don't understand what you're interfering with, Linda. This goes way beyond what your small-town mind can comprehend. There are powerful people involved, people who can make problems disappear permanently." The threat was clear, but it was also a confession. Emma's recording device had captured everything, and the uploads were already spreading across multiple servers. The network's greatest weakness was being exposed. Their arrogance had made them careless about witnesses. Outside, more vehicles were arriving, not just law enforcement, but news vans attracted by social media reports of the confrontation. The story was spreading faster than Brandon's network could contain it, carried by the viral power of ordinary people refusing to look away from injustice. The next few minutes would determine whether Emma Collins became another missing child statistic or the catalyst that brought down a trafficking network that had operated with impunity for years. The evidence was out there now, spreading beyond the reach of local corruption, but first, they had to survive long enough for it to matter. The black SUV with government plates disgorged three figures who moved with the practiced efficiency of federal agents, but Marcus's trained eye caught the subtle wrongness in their formation. Real federal response teams moved with overlapping fields of fire and tactical awareness. These agents moved like executives arriving at a business meeting. Their leader, a woman in her mid-30s with severe features and an expensive suit, surveyed the scene with the cold satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plans were proceeding exactly as intended. Emma pressed closer to Marcus, her small body trembling as she recognized that even the supposed cavalry couldn't be trusted. The recording device in her hand continued its silent documentation, capturing every word and gesture as the web of corruption revealed its true scope. Her 6-year-old mind struggled to process the magnitude of adult evil surrounding her. But her father's training held firm. Document everything, trust no one in authority, and never stop fighting for the truth. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez, FBI, the woman announced, her badge gleaming as she approached Sheriff Bradley with the familiarity of old colleagues. Excellent work containing the situation, Tom. Our mutual friend was concerned about exposure, but it looks like you've handled things perfectly. The casual acknowledgement of their partnership hit the assembled civilians like a physical blow. Not only was local law enforcement corrupted, but federal oversight itself was compromised. Marcus felt his last hope of institutional rescue evaporating as he realized they were facing a network that had infiltrated every level of authority designed to protect children. Linda Peterson's Facebook live stream continued broadcasting to a growing audience that had swelled past 12,000 viewers. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them. Outrage, disbelief, demands for action. But what good were digital witnesses when the system itself was rotten? The live count kept climbing as viewers shared the stream across platforms, but Agent Martinez seemed unconcerned about the exposure. Social media is such an unreliable medium, Martinez said conversationally, checking her phone with practiced ease. Technical glitches happen all the time, especially when national security is involved. Our digital crimes unit is very thorough about cleaning up inconsistencies. As if summoned by her words, Linda's phone screen began displaying error messages. The Facebook live stream cut out abruptly, followed by her Instagram account, then Twitter. One by one, every platform she'd been using to broadcast the truth went dark, leaving only error messages about violations of community standards and terms of service. The beautiful thing about modern technology, Sheriff Bradley added with renewed confidence, is how easily it can be controlled when you have the right connections. No one will believe wild conspiracy theories without evidence, and evidence has a way of disappearing when it threatens important operations. But Emma's recording device continued its silent work, capturing every admission of guilt, every casual discussion of corruption. Her father had taught her that the most powerful evidence often came from letting bad people reveal themselves when they felt safe. Detective James Collins had been investigating this very network when his car accident occurred, an accident that Emma was beginning to realize might not have been accidental at all. Agent Martinez, Brandon said, approaching with visible relief as he straightened his expensive polo shirt, I trust we can wrap this up quickly. The client is expecting delivery by 6 p.m., and delays make everyone nervous. The casual reference to Emma as merchandise being delivered to a client made Marcus's vision blur with rage. Every instinct screamed at him to break free from Sheriff Bradley's custody and tear Brandon apart with his bare hands, but his military training overrode emotion with tactical thinking. Violence would only give them justification to escalate, and Emma needed him thinking clearly. Of course, Martinez replied smoothly. The operation has proceeded exactly as planned. Mr. Stone will be processed for psychiatric evaluation. Military records show extensive PTSD treatment, making his testimony unreliable. The child will be returned to her legal guardian's custody, and Mrs. Peterson will discover that making false reports to federal authorities carries serious consequences. The systematic nature of their cover-up revealed years of practice. Every potential witness would be discredited, intimidated, or eliminated. Every piece of evidence would disappear into digital oblivion. Emma would vanish into a network that treated children as commodities, and no one would be able to prove she'd ever existed. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the power of ordinary people to refuse complicity in evil. Pete Morrison, the 70-year-old trucker who'd been quietly operating his CB radio from his booth, suddenly stood up with the deliberate movements of someone who'd made a life-changing decision. His weathered face showed the kind of determination that had built America, ordinary people doing extraordinary things when it mattered most. "Agent Martinez," he said in the carrying voice of someone accustomed to being heard over diesel engines, "I've been a trucker for 47 years. I've driven through every state in this union, and I've seen good folks and bad folks in all of them, but I've never seen anything as evil as what you people are doing to this little girl." Martinez turned toward him with mild irritation. "Sir, this is federal business. I suggest you return to your meal and mind your own affairs." Pete's smile held no humor. "See, that's where you're wrong, ma'am. This little girl's safety is everyone's business. And while you were busy shutting down her internet, I was broadcasting everything over CB radio to truckers from here to Maine. Channel 19's been carrying this story for the past 20 minutes, and every driver with a radio knows about your corruption network." The CB radio network was something Martinez's digital crimes unit couldn't touch, a decentralized communication system that operated beyond internet infrastructure. Truckers had been relaying Emma's story across the country, creating an analog backup of evidence that couldn't be digitally erased. "Moreover," Pete continued, "my nephew works for CNN in Atlanta. Funny thing about family, when Uncle Pete calls with a story about federal agents trafficking children, family tends to listen real careful. News vans should be arriving from Phoenix and Tucson within the hour." Agent Martinez's composure flickered for the first time. The careful operation she'd orchestrated was unraveling faster than she could contain it. Digital evidence could be manipulated or destroyed, but human witnesses spread across multiple states were harder to silence. Emma stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the adult posturing with crystalline clarity. "My daddy always said that truth doesn't need to be loud to be heard, it just needs someone brave enough to speak it." She held up her recording device, which had captured every word of their conversation. "Everything you said about hurting me, about making evidence disappear, about selling children, it's all recorded. And not just on this device." From her Hello Kitty backpack, Emma produced a second recording device, then a third. Detective James Collins had trained his daughter to always have multiple backups, multiple escape plans, multiple ways to ensure the truth survived even if she didn't. "My daddy taught me that bad people always tell the truth when they think they're safe," Emma said with heartbreaking wisdom. "He said the best way to catch monsters is to let them think they've already won." The recordings had been automatically uploading to secure servers that her father had established years ago, servers that existed outside the normal internet infrastructure, protected by military-grade encryption that even federal agencies would need warrants and weeks of legal processes to access. Sheriff Bradley's hand moved toward his weapon, but Pete Morrison stepped between him and Emma. The elderly trucker was joined by other diners, the middle-aged couple from Iowa, a young mother traveling with her own daughter, an elderly man who'd been quietly reading his newspaper. One by one, ordinary Americans formed a human wall between a 6-year-old girl and the forces that wanted to destroy her. "You people have lost your minds," Agent Martinez said, her professional veneer finally cracking. "Do you have any idea what you're interfering with?" This network serves clients at the highest levels of government and international business. The economic and political implications of disrupting these relationships could destabilize entire regions. Then maybe those regions need to be destabilized, Pete replied with the quiet wisdom of someone who'd seen enough of the world to know the difference between order and justice. Outside, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the desert air. But were they coming to rescue Emma, or to ensure she never had the chance to testify about what she'd witnessed? In a world where federal agents facilitated child trafficking, where sheriffs protected predators instead of children, and where judges sold verdicts to the highest bidder, the arrival of more authority figures offered no comfort. Emma looked up at Marcus, her blue eyes holding a question that no child should ever have to ask. "Uncle Marcus, are the good guys coming, or the bad guys?" Marcus met her gaze with all the honesty his broken heart could muster. "I don't know, sweetheart, but whatever happens, we're not giving up. Truth has a power all its own, and eventually, it always wins." The helicopters were getting closer, and with them, the final test of whether justice was possible in a system designed to protect the powerful at the expense of the innocent. At 4:47 p.m., the desert heat had turned the rest stop parking lot into a shimmering cauldron, but inside the Desert Rose Diner, the temperature had nothing to do with the weather. The air crackled with tension so thick it seemed to press against the windows, threatening to shatter the fragile normalcy that had held the afternoon together. Brandon Hayes stood at the corner booth, his expensive polo shirt now damp with perspiration that had nothing to do with Arizona's summer fury. His carefully maintained facade was cracking like paint in the sun, revealing glimpses of something far darker underneath. The legal documents scattered across the table: custody orders, emergency guardianship papers, medical authorizations, suddenly looked less like legitimate paperwork and more like sophisticated forgeries designed to fool anyone who didn't look too closely. "We're leaving, now." His voice carried a sharp edge that made several other diners glance up from their meals. Emma sat perfectly still beside him, her Hello Kitty backpack clutched against her chest like armor, her blue eyes wide with the kind of terror that belonged in war zones, not roadside diners. Marcus Stone blocked their path to the exit, his military bearing evident in every line of his body. 23 years of training had taught him to recognize the moment when talking stopped and action began, and that moment had arrived with the subtle shift in Brandon's posture, the way his free hand kept checking his phone, the increasing desperation in his eyes as 5 p.m. approached. "I think we should wait for those state police officers," Marcus said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to life or death situations. "They seemed very interested in having a conversation with you." Brandon's laugh held no humor. "State police? About what? A concerned stepfather taking his daughter home?" He pulled Emma closer, and she winced as his fingers dug into her shoulder. "You're looking at a kidnapping charge if you don't move aside. I have every legal right to leave with my daughter." "Your daughter?" Linda Peterson emerged from behind the counter, her grandmother's intuition finally crystallizing into certainty. "Funny thing about that. Emma here told me her daddy died in a car accident when she was 3, said he was a police detective who taught her how to stay safe." The color drained from Brandon's face. His grip on Emma tightened until she made a small sound of pain that cut through the diner like a knife. "She's confused. Trauma from her mother's abuse. The court-appointed psychologist documented her tendency toward fantasy." "Is that so?" Marcus pulled out his phone, which now showed 2 bars of signal thanks to Linda's old cell phone booster. "Because I just got very interesting information from my contact at the FBI. Turns out there's an active federal investigation into a trafficking network operating between Arizona and Mexico. They've been tracking financial transactions, court document forgeries, and payoffs to local officials. Imagine my surprise when your name came up." The lie rolled off Marcus's tongue with practiced ease, a necessary deception in a war where the enemy wore suits instead of uniforms. But Brandon's reaction told him he'd struck closer to truth than fiction. The man's face went ashen, his eyes darting toward the parking lot where a black SUV sat idling near the highway entrance. "You don't know what you're dealing with," Brandon hissed. "This goes deeper than you can imagine. Judges, police chiefs, social workers, they're all part of it. You think your military record means anything? They'll destroy you. They'll make you disappear." Emma's small voice cut through the adult posturing like a blade. "He hurt Mommy. I saw him. I recorded it." Her tiny hands shook as she spoke, but her voice held steady. "He gives me medicine that makes me sleepy, and then bad men come to look at me. He said if I told anyone, Mommy would die in jail." The diner fell silent, except for the labored wheezing of the old air conditioning unit. Even the truckers at the counter had stopped eating, their weathered faces reflecting a growing understanding of what they were witnessing. Brandon's mask finally shattered completely. "You little bitch," he snarled, raising his hand toward Emma's face. "I should have sold you months ago instead of waiting for the premium buyers." Marcus moved with the fluid precision of muscle memory, his hand intercepting Brandon's wrist with enough force to make the man cry out, "Touch her, and I'll break every bone in your hand." But Brandon's revelation had shifted the entire dynamic. The approaching buyers, the carefully timed pickup, the expensive equipment in the black SUV. This wasn't just about one child. This was about a business, a network that treated children like commodities. "You have no idea how deep this goes," Brandon gasped, cradling his wrist. "The judge who gave me custody? He's one of our best customers. The sheriff who investigated Sarah's instability? He's been on payroll for 3 years. The CPS worker who recommended removing Emma from her mother's care. She needs the money for her son's cancer treatments." Each revelation hit the assembled crowd like physical blows. Linda Peterson's face went white as she realized the scope of the corruption, the systematic failure of every institution designed to protect children. "My God," whispered an elderly woman at a nearby booth. "How many children?" Brandon's bitter laugh filled the silence. "Dozens, maybe hundreds over the years. Rich men pay premium prices for specific experiences, and children from broken homes, children whose mothers are in jail on trumped-up charges, children with no one to miss them, they're perfect inventory." The word inventory hung in the air like poison. Emma pressed herself against Marcus's side, her small body trembling with the effort of holding back tears. Outside, the black SUV's engine revved impatiently. Through the window, Marcus could see at least 2 figures in the front seats, and something metallic glinted on the dashboard. Weapons, almost certainly. Sheriff Tom Bradley's patrol car pulled into the parking lot at that moment, lights flashing, but no sirens. Marcus felt a brief surge of hope until he saw Brandon's smile return. "Right on time," Brandon said softly. "Tom's very reliable. He'll tell you all about Marcus Stone's history of PTSD-related violence, his inability to distinguish reality from paranoid delusions. By the time this is sorted out, Emma and I will be across the Mexican border." The patrol car's door opened and Sheriff Bradley emerged, a tall man with graying hair and the comfortable bearing of someone who'd worn a badge for decades. But as he approached the diner, his eyes went directly to Brandon with the familiarity of old associates. "Having some trouble here, Brandon?" the sheriff asked, his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "Got a call about some vagrant harassing you and your daughter." "That would be me," Marcus said, stepping forward. "Marcus Stone, former Marine, and I'm not the one you should be arresting." Sheriff Bradley's eyes narrowed. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from Mr. Hayes and his daughter. We can discuss your concerns at the station." The corruption was complete, total, systematic. Every adult in authority, every system designed to protect the innocent had been bought or broken. Marcus felt the familiar rage building in his chest, the same fury that had sustained him through 2 combat deployments, the righteous anger of a warrior facing true evil. But this wasn't Afghanistan. He couldn't solve this with superior firepower or military tactics. This required something different, something that relied on the one thing Brandon's network couldn't buy or corrupt, the basic human decency of ordinary people. "Linda," Marcus called out, "how's that cell phone booster working? Getting good signal now?" Linda Peterson's eyes sharpened with understanding. "Crystal clear," she replied. "In fact, I've been streaming live on Facebook for the past 10 minutes. Amazing how many people are watching. Already over 3,000 viewers." Brandon's face went white as he realized the implications. Every word, every threat, every admission of guilt had been broadcast live to thousands of witnesses. The network's greatest strength, its secrecy, had just become its fatal weakness. Sheriff Bradley's hand moved toward his weapon, but stopped as he noticed the phones now pointing in his direction from every booth in the diner. Truckers, families, elderly couples, all of them recording, all of them sharing, all of them ensuring that whatever happened next would be witnessed by the world. The black SUV's doors opened, and 2 men began walking toward the diner entrance. They moved with the casual confidence of people accustomed to intimidating witnesses into silence, but their steps faltered as they noticed the forest of cell phones and the growing crowd of vehicles pulling into the parking lot. "You've destroyed everything," Brandon whispered, his voice hollow with defeat and rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? How many people will suffer because you couldn't mind your own business?" Marcus knelt down to Emma's level, his voice gentle, despite the chaos surrounding them. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when powerful people want you to stay quiet. Your daddy taught you that, didn't he?" Emma nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "He said good people fight for what's right, even when it's scary. He was a smart man," Marcus said, "and he'd be very proud of you." The sound of approaching sirens filled the desert air, multiple vehicles coming from different directions. Real help was finally coming. The sirens grew louder, but hope died in Marcus's chest as he watched Sheriff Bradley's satisfied smile spread across his weathered face. The approaching vehicles weren't salvation. They were the final nails in the coffin of justice. Through the diner's windows, Marcus could see 3 more patrol cars converging on the rest stop, their red and blue lights painting the desert landscape in ominous colors that spoke of authority corrupted and power misused. "You see," Brandon said, his confidence returning as backup arrived, "this is what happens when ordinary people try to play hero. The system protects its own, and we are the system." Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, his hand now openly resting on his weapon. "Marcus Stone, you're under arrest for harassment, making terroristic threats, and attempting to interfere with lawful custody proceedings." His voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. "Emma, sweetheart, come away from the bad man. Your daddy needs to get you home safely." Emma pressed herself closer to Marcus, her small body trembling with terror that went beyond childish fear. This was the bone-deep panic of someone who understood that the adults meant to protect her had become her greatest threat. "Please don't make me go," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the approaching sirens. "Please don't let them take me." The other patrol cars disgorged their occupants, deputies who moved with the casual efficiency of men carrying out routine business. Marcus recognized the type. Good old boys who asked no questions as long as the overtime pay cleared and the pension remained secure. They formed a loose perimeter around the diner, effectively cutting off any escape routes. "This is all very touching," Brandon said, straightening his expensive polo shirt and reclaiming his role as the wronged father. "But we really do need to get going. Emma has a doctor's appointment in Tucson, and these delays have already made us late." Linda Peterson watched from behind her counter, her grandmother's heart breaking as she witnessed the systematic failure of every institution meant to protect the innocent. The Facebook live stream continued, viewer numbers climbing past 5,000. But what good were witnesses when the law itself was compromised? Comments flooded the screen, outrage, disbelief, demands for justice, but they were just digital screams in the void. "You know what the beautiful thing is?" Sheriff Bradley said conversationally as he approached Marcus with handcuffs. "Military records show you've been treated for PTSD, paranoid episodes, difficulty adjusting to civilian life. Classic case of a troubled veteran projecting his trauma onto innocent situations. The judge will be very understanding. Mandatory psychological evaluation, probably some nice quiet time in a facility where you can get the help you obviously need." The handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists with the finality of a coffin lid closing. Everything he'd survived, 2 deployments, roadside bombs, firefights that lasted hours, had led to this moment of complete powerlessness. He'd faced enemy combatants with automatic weapons and felt less helpless than he did watching a 6-year-old girl about to be delivered to monsters wearing badges. "Mommy told me about people like you," Emma said suddenly, her voice cutting through the adult conversations with surprising clarity. She was looking directly at Sheriff Bradley, her blue eyes holding a steadiness that seemed impossible for someone so young. She said sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. "Your mommy was very sick, sweetheart," Brandon said with practiced concern. "That's why she said those confused things. But Daddy's here now, and these nice police officers are going to make sure we get home safely." Emma's response was to reach into her Hello Kitty backpack one final time. Her small hands emerged clutching something that made every adult in the room freeze, a cell phone, its screen glowing with an active video call. "Hi, Mommy," Emma said to the screen, her voice suddenly strong and clear. "I'm at the restaurant like you told me. The nice soldier is trying to help, but the bad police are here too." The phone's speaker crackled with a woman's voice, desperate, urgent, filled with the kind of maternal fury that could move mountains. "Baby, are you okay? Don't let them take you anywhere. Mommy's coming, I promise." Sheriff Bradley lunged for the phone, but Emma was quicker, dancing away from his grasp with the agility of a child who'd learned survival skills far too early. "Mommy, the man in the uniform is friends with Brandon. He's going to help Brandon take me to the bad place. Sarah Collins is in county lockup on charges of child endangerment and making false accusations," Brandon said quickly, his composure cracking as he realized the implications. "She's not legally allowed to contact the child without supervision." But the damage was already done. Sarah's voice carried clearly through the diner's tense silence. "I've been calling every reporter, every FBI field office, every child advocacy group in the state. Judge Morrison's been taking bribes to separate children from their parents. Sheriff Bradley runs protection for trafficking operations. The whole system is rotten, and they thought keeping me locked up would keep me quiet." The Facebook live stream viewer count hit 8,000. Local news stations began picking up the feed. Social media exploded with hashtags that would trend within the hour. The carefully maintained secrecy that protected Brandon's network was dissolving in real time, broadcast to an audience that grew by the minute. "Turn that phone off," Sheriff Bradley ordered, his calm facade finally cracking. "This is police business, not some damn reality show." "Actually," Linda Peterson said from behind the counter, her voice carrying newfound steel, "this is my establishment, and I decide what happens here. And what's happening is that everyone's finally seeing the truth about what you people have been doing to families in this county." The black SUV that had been waiting patiently in the parking lot suddenly roared to life, its occupants apparently deciding that discretion was the better part of valor. Gravel sprayed as it accelerated toward the highway, but not before dozens of phones captured clear images of its license plate. Brandon watched his escape route disappear with visible desperation. The careful network of corruption and intimidation that had protected him for years was crumbling faster than he could shore up the cracks. "You don't understand," he said, his voice taking on a pleading quality. "This isn't just about money. There are powerful people involved, people who can destroy all of you if this gets out." "It's already out," Marcus said quietly, despite the handcuffs. 8,000 people and counting. By tomorrow, it'll be national news. By next week, it'll be congressional hearings. You built your power on secrecy, and secrecy just died. Emma continued talking to her mother through the phone, her voice growing stronger with each exchange. "Mommy, I kept all the evidence like Daddy taught me. The videos, the pictures, the papers with the judges' names on them. I hid everything in safe places like a treasure hunt." Sarah's sob of pride carried clearly through the speaker. "That's my brave girl. Your daddy would be so proud."
Remember what he always said about telling the truth? "Truth doesn't need to shout to be heard," Emma recited, her small voice carrying her father's wisdom. "It just needs someone brave enough to speak it." The arriving deputies exchanged nervous glances as they realized the magnitude of what they'd walked into. These weren't the usual domestic disputes or traffic stops that filled their days. This was the kind of career-ending scandal that destroyed entire departments and sent good old boys to federal prison. "Bradley," one of them said quietly, "maybe we should wait for—" "We follow orders," Sheriff Bradley snapped, but his authority was bleeding away with each passing second. "Take the girl to protective custody and transport the suspect to county for processing." But when the deputy reached for Emma, she did something that surprised everyone. Instead of running or hiding, she stood perfectly still and looked directly into Linda's phone camera. "My name is Emma Collins," she said with the clear diction of someone who understood she was speaking to history. "I'm 6 years old. These men are trying to take me away from my mommy so they can sell me to bad people. If something happens to me, it's because the police helped them do it." The words hung in the desert air like an indictment of everything American justice was supposed to represent. 8,000 viewers became 10,000, then 12,000. News vans were already being dispatched from Phoenix and Tucson. Federal agents who'd been monitoring the trafficking investigation were making urgent phone calls. The network's greatest strength, its integration into the system itself, had become its fatal weakness. There was nowhere left to hide when the hideout was burning down around them. Sheriff Bradley's radio crackled with an urgent voice. "All units be advised we have federal agents en route to your location. Do not take any action regarding suspects until federal arrives. Acknowledge." Bradley stared at the radio as if it had betrayed him, which, in a sense, it had. The protective wall of local corruption was about to meet federal oversight, and everyone in the diner knew which would prove stronger. Emma smiled for the first time all day, still clutching her mother's voice like a lifeline in the growing storm. The federal agents arrived like a thunderstorm breaking over the desert, swift, overwhelming, and utterly transformative. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez stepped out of the lead SUV with the controlled precision of someone who'd been preparing for this moment for months. Behind her, a team of FBI agents fanned out across the parking lot while others secured the perimeter, their practiced efficiency making the local deputies look like children playing dress-up. But it was what happened next that shattered every assumption Marcus had built about this day. Agent Martinez walked directly to Sheriff Bradley and placed her hand on his shoulder in what looked like a gesture of solidarity. "Tom, excellent work. The operation went perfectly." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow.
Even Emma's face crumpled with betrayal as she realized that her moment of triumph was dissolving into another layer of deception. The federal cavalry she'd been counting on was just another part of the machine designed to crush children like her. "I don't understand," Linda Peterson whispered, her Facebook live stream still running, now showing nearly 15,000 horrified viewers the moment when hope died. "The FBI. They're supposed to be the good guys." Agent Martinez smiled with the cold satisfaction of someone whose carefully laid plans were finally bearing fruit. "Mr. Hayes has been an invaluable asset to our operation. His network provided us with crucial intelligence about international trafficking routes. In exchange for his cooperation, certain accommodations were made." Brandon's relief was palpable as the handcuffs came off and he straightened his expensive polo shirt. "You see, Marcus, even your military heroics mean nothing when you're fighting the entire system. Emma will be well taken care of in her new home. Her specialized education will prepare her for a very lucrative future serving important clients who appreciate youth." The revelation hit the assembled crowd like a wrecking ball. Not only was the local system corrupt, but the federal oversight meant to check that corruption was equally compromised. The FBI itself was facilitating the trafficking of children, using Brandon's network to serve clients whose wealth and influence placed them above any law. Emma stood frozen in the center of the diner, still clutching her mother's phone, her small world collapsing as she realized that every adult authority figure was part of the conspiracy against her. "Mommy?" she whispered into the phone, her voice breaking. "Mommy, they're all bad people." Sarah's anguished scream carried through the speaker, the sound of a mother watching her child disappear into hell while she remained powerless to intervene. "Emma, baby, run. Run as fast as you can." But where could a 6-year-old girl run in the middle of the Arizona desert, surrounded by armed adults who viewed her as property to be transferred? Marcus felt something snap inside his chest, not his spirit, which had been tested in combat zones around the world, but his faith in the very concept of justice. The handcuffs bit into his wrists as he struggled against his restraints, desperate to reach the child who'd trusted him with her life. "This is being broadcast live," he said desperately to Agent Martinez. "Thousands of people are watching. You can't cover this up." Agent Martinez glanced at Linda's phone with mild amusement. "Social media is so unreliable, isn't it? Technical glitches, server crashes, mysterious disappearances of inconvenient footage. Our digital crimes unit is very thorough about cleaning up loose ends." As if summoned by her words, the Facebook live stream suddenly cut out. Linda's phone screen went black, then displayed an error message about violating community standards. 15,000 witnesses vanished in an instant, their digital connection to Emma's plight severed by invisible hands. "The beautiful thing about modern technology," Sheriff Bradley added with renewed confidence, "is how easily it can be manipulated. No one will believe wild stories about FBI corruption without evidence, and evidence has a way of disappearing when it threatens national security interests." Emma looked around the diner with growing desperation. Every escape route was blocked. Every authority figure was compromised. Even the ordinary citizens who might have helped were rendered powerless by the systematic nature of the conspiracy she'd uncovered. But then something extraordinary happened. Linda Peterson, grandmother of 3 and owner of a roadside diner, stepped out from behind her counter and placed herself between Emma and Agent Martinez. "I've been running this place for 32 years, she said quietly. "I've served coffee to truckers and families, listened to their stories, watched their children grow up. I know what real love looks like, and I know what evil looks like. And you people are evil." "Ma'am, you need to step aside," Agent Martinez said with professional courtesy that couldn't quite mask her impatience. "This is a federal operation involving national security. Interference will result in serious charges."
Linda didn't move. I'm 67 years old. My husband died 5 years ago. My children are grown and my grandchildren live in California. What exactly are you going to threaten me with that matters more than this little girl's life? Her defiance seemed to awaken something in the other civilians. An elderly trucker named Pete stood up from his booth, his weathered hands steady despite his 70 years. "I've got grandchildren too," he said simply. "Count me in." A middle-aged couple from Iowa joined them, then a young mother traveling with her own daughter. One by one, the ordinary people in the diner formed a human wall between Emma and the forces that wanted to destroy her. They had no weapons, no special training, no legal authority, just the basic human decency that refused to let a child be sacrificed to serve powerful predators. Agent Martinez's facade of professional courtesy finally cracked. "You people have no idea what you're interfering with. This network serves clients at the highest levels of government, business, and international finance. The economic and political implications of disrupting these relationships could destabilize entire regions." "Then maybe those regions need to be destabilized," Pete said with the quiet wisdom of someone who'd seen enough of the world to know the difference between order and justice. Brandon's carefully maintained composure was beginning to fray as he realized that his supposedly foolproof escape plan was being threatened by the most dangerous force of all: ordinary people refusing to be complicit in evil. "You're all making a terrible mistake," he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "The judge who gave me custody of Emma, he's been compromised for years. The social workers, the police, the FBI, we own them all. Even if you somehow prevent this transfer, Emma will never be safe. We'll get her eventually, and then she'll suffer far worse than if you'd just let this proceed quietly." Emma listened to these words with the terrible understanding that comes to children who've been forced to mature too quickly. She knew that Brandon was right. As long as the network existed, as long as powerful people viewed children as commodities, she would never truly be safe. But then she remembered something her father had taught her during their last conversation before the car accident that took his life. "Princess, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when powerful people want you to stay quiet. Truth has a power all its own, and eventually it always wins." Emma walked to the center of the diner and stood on a chair so everyone could see her clearly. When she spoke, her voice carried with surprising strength across the room. "My name is Emma Collins. My daddy was Detective James Collins of the Phoenix Police Department. He died trying to investigate bad people who hurt children. Before he died, he taught me that truth is more powerful than fear, and that good people will always fight to protect children, even when it's hard." She reached into her Hello Kitty backpack one final time and pulled out not just the USB drive, but a small recording device that had been running throughout the entire encounter. "Everything they said is recorded," she announced. "All their confessions, all their threats, all their plans. My daddy taught me to always have backup evidence because bad people lie and good people need proof." The recording device was old-fashioned technology, the kind that didn't rely on internet connections or servers that could be manipulated remotely. Emma's deceased father, it seemed, had prepared his daughter for exactly this kind of situation. Agent Martinez lunged for the device, but Linda Peterson was faster, snatching it from Emma's hands and clutching it to her chest. "Pete," she called to the trucker, "your CB radio still work?" Pete grinned with genuine pleasure. 24 hours a day, sweetheart. Channel 19's got truckers from here to Maine." Within minutes, Emma's recording was being broadcast across the trucker network, copied and retransmitted by dozens of drivers who understood the stakes. Unlike digital platforms that could be controlled, the CB radio network was decentralized, resilient, and completely beyond the reach of federal manipulation. The truth was spreading faster than Agent Martinez could contain it, carried by the voices of ordinary Americans who refused to let a child disappear into darkness.
6 months later, the Desert Rose Diner had become something of a pilgrimage site. Travelers would detour miles off their intended routes just to see the place where a 6-year-old girl had brought down a trafficking network that reached into the highest levels of government. Linda Peterson had framed newspaper clippings on the wall, headlines that read, "Child's Courage Exposes Federal Corruption," and "The Little Girl Who Changed Everything." But she was prouder of the smaller, more personal mementos, thank you letters from other survivors, pictures of families reunited, and a hand-drawn card from Emma that simply said, "Thank you for believing me." The afternoon sun streamed through those same windows where Marcus had first spotted Emma's desperate signals, casting golden light across a scene that would have seemed impossible just months before. Emma sat in a corner booth, not the same one where she'd been trapped with Brandon, but one by the window where she could see the desert stretching endlessly toward hope. Her blonde hair had grown longer, and the hollow look in her blue eyes had been replaced by something that resembled childhood wonder. She was carefully coloring in a book, her tongue poking out in concentration as she selected just the right shade of purple for a butterfly's wings. Across from her sat Sarah Collins, no longer the broken woman who had sobbed desperately through a contraband cell phone. The months of legal battles, testimony, and healing had carved lines of strength into her face that hadn't been there before. She wore simple clothes, a cotton sundress and sandals, but she carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had fought the most powerful forces in the country and won. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she watched her daughter color with the intense gratitude of someone who had nearly lost everything that mattered. "Uncle Marcus should be here soon," Sarah said, checking the vintage watch that had been her late husband's. "He texted from Tucson about an hour ago." Emma looked up from her coloring book, her face brightening with genuine joy. "Is he bringing the surprise he promised?" "You'll have to wait and see," Sarah replied, but her smile suggested she knew exactly what the surprise was. Marcus Stone pulled into the parking lot at exactly 3:30 p.m., driving not the rusted pickup truck that had brought him here 6 months ago, but a newer model with Arizona plates and a car seat properly installed in the back. He'd traded his worn military surplus clothing for khakis and a polo shirt, though he still moved with the careful awareness of someone who'd seen combat. The biggest change was in his eyes. The haunted look of a man without purpose had been replaced by the steady gaze of someone who knew exactly why he got up each morning. Behind him, a second car pulled in, a modest sedan driven by a woman with graying hair and kind eyes. She emerged from the vehicle with the careful movements of someone approaching something precious and fragile, her face showing a mixture of nervousness and overwhelming joy. Linda Peterson looked up from the counter where she was preparing Emma's usual order, chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream, though Emma's appetite had returned fully once she felt safe again. "Right on time," she said with satisfaction. "That man's punctual as a Swiss watch." The door chime announced Marcus's arrival, and Emma was out of her booth like a shot, launching herself into his arms with the complete trust of a child who knew she was loved unconditionally. He caught her easily, swinging her around once before setting her down and ruffling her hair. "How's my favorite art student?" he asked, genuinely interested in her answer. "I drew a picture of our new house," Emma said proudly. "Want to see?" She led him to the booth where Sarah waited, her expression warm with the kind of love that had grown slowly and carefully between two people who had found each other in the midst of trauma. Their relationship had developed gradually, built on shared experience and mutual respect rather than movie-style romance. They were planning a small wedding for the fall, nothing fancy, just close friends and the chosen family they had created together. "Before we look at pictures," Marcus said, "I have someone I'd like you to meet." He gestured toward the woman who had followed him in, and Emma studied her with the careful attention she still paid to new adults. The woman approached slowly, her eyes never leaving Emma's face. "Emma," Marcus said gently, This is Mrs. Eleanor Collins. She's your daddy's mom, your grandmother." The silence that followed was profound. Eleanor Collins had spent 3 years believing her granddaughter was lost forever, victim of a system that had painted her son's widow as mentally unstable and dangerous. Brandon's network had been so thorough in its destruction of James Collins's family that even his own mother had been convinced that Emma was better off without contact with her father's relatives. Emma looked at this woman who shared her blue eyes and her father's stubborn chin, processing information with the careful consideration of someone who had learned to be cautious about trusting adults. "Daddy's mommy?" she asked softly. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Your daddy was my little boy before he was your daddy. He loved you so much, sweetheart." "He talked about you all the time." Emma stepped closer, studying her grandmother's face with scientific precision. "Do you have pictures of him when he was little?" "I have hundreds," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I have his old room exactly the way he left it, with all his books and his baseball trophies and the model airplanes he built when he was your age." The reunion that followed was gentle rather than dramatic. Emma was still learning to trust, still processing the trauma of nearly being sold to monsters. But as her grandmother showed her photographs on her phone and told stories about her father's childhood, something began to heal in both of them. Sarah watched this interaction with complex emotions. Part of her was grateful that Emma would have another loving adult in her life, someone who could share memories of James that Sarah herself didn't possess. But another part of her was terrified. After fighting so hard to keep her daughter safe, the thought of sharing her with anyone still triggered protective instincts. Marcus seemed to sense her internal struggle. He took her hand under the table, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "She's not taking Emma away," he said quietly. "She's just adding to the love Emma already has." "I know," Sarah whispered back. "It's just hard to let go of being afraid." Across the diner, Linda Peterson was preparing something special. She'd been working on it for weeks, ever since Marcus had called to arrange this meeting. She emerged from the kitchen carrying a cake decorated with 6 candles and frosting that read, "Welcome home, Emma." "It's not your birthday," Linda announced with a grin, "but we're celebrating anyway, because sometimes families find each other in the most unexpected places." Emma's eyes went wide at the sight of the cake. She'd missed her actual birthday while the legal proceedings were ongoing, the date lost in the chaos of testimony and trials, and the systematic dismantling of Brandon's network. This felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen from her. As they gathered around the cake, Marcus felt his phone vibrate with a text message. The number was blocked, but the message was clear. "The others are in prison, but I'm still free. Enjoy your happy family while you can." He deleted the message without reading it to Sarah or Emma. Brandon Hayes was serving life without parole in a maximum security federal prison, his network destroyed, his accomplices behind bars. But there would always be other monsters, other networks, other children in need of protection. The difference was that now Marcus knew his purpose, not as a soldier fighting distant wars, but as a guardian standing watch over the people he loved. Emma blew out her candles with the fervor of someone making a very important wish. When asked what she'd wished for, she grinned and said, "I can't tell you, or it won't come true. But it has to do with keeping families together." As the afternoon faded into evening, as Emma fell asleep against her grandmother's shoulder while Marcus and Sarah made quiet plans for the future, the Desert Rose Diner settled into its familiar rhythm. Truckers came and went. Families on vacation paused for rest and refreshment, and ordinary life continued its eternal dance. But in one corner booth, surrounded by the people who had chosen to love her, a little girl who had faced monsters and emerged victorious dreamed peaceful dreams. She had learned that truth was indeed more powerful than fear, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when it mattered most, and that families weren't just made of blood, they were made of love, courage, and the decision to show up for each other when the world seemed darkest. The highway stretched endlessly in both directions, carrying travelers toward unknown destinations. But for the first time in 6 years, Emma Collins knew exactly where she belonged, surrounded by people who would fight for her, protected by love that no amount of money or power could corrupt, and safe in the knowledge that her father's greatest lesson had proven true. Truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it. Dear friends, as we reach the golden years of our lives, we understand that true happiness isn't found in grand gestures or Hollywood endings. It's discovered in the quiet moments when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things. Emma's story reminds us that family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up when darkness falls, who believe us when others won't listen, who stand between us and harm even when they have everything to lose. At 55, 60, or 68, we've learned that the most precious treasures aren't in our bank accounts. They're in the grandchildren who run to us with scraped knees, the friends who call just to check in, the communities that rally around those who need help most. Marcus found his purpose not in medals or recognition, but in protecting a child who reminded him why heroes exist. Sarah discovered that a mother's love can move mountains, even when the system seems rigged against her. And Emma? She proved that truth spoken by the smallest voice can topple the mightiest towers of corruption. This is the happiness that sustains us through all seasons, knowing we matter, knowing we're loved, knowing our lives have made a difference in someone else's story. What moment in your life reminded you that family extends beyond blood relations? Have you ever witnessed an ordinary person do something extraordinary to protect someone vulnerable? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter and inspire others.